democracy looks like. Tell me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. Tell me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. We are in this together. Yeah. We are in this together. We are in this together. Yeah. Hello, helicopter. We are in this together. Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm April D'Amato, the host of In This Together. My show is dedicated to bringing the awakened people in our country together with community activism so that we can better our community, our country, and our planet. In today's show, we'll be talking about money in politics, which became a really heated issue back in the 2015 Democratic primaries when Bernie Sanders was running against Hillary Clinton. While money in politics has been a negative issue and has been in politics for quite some time, the reality is we've noticed in the last several years it's increasingly become more prominent in our government. And it's really showing us that how detrimental it is to our democracy. So my guest today is Wilmer Lambert from an organization called Wolf PAC. Wolf PAC's goal is taken from their website, so let me read that to you now. To save democracy in the United States by getting a much-needed amendment to the U.S. Constitution that will establish elections which are free of the corrupting influence of money in our political system and fair enough that any citizen can run for office, not just millionaires and their allies. I'm so excited to have Wilmer here today to speak with me about this topic. This has been a passion of mine for several years now, and it's apparent from our last presidential election that we really prompted a major awakening to our community, to our country, and I've noticed a lot more participation in our democracy, which is fantastic in and of itself. But the truth is that we've needed change in our government for quite some time, and it precedes that last election. I believe our priority needs to be the source of the problems, and the corruption in politics is really related to money in politics. So thank you so much, Wilmer, for joining with me today. I have a lot of questions for you. I hope that you're prepared.
yeah, we'll try my best. Thanks for having me.
So I want you to tell my audience why money in politics is such a big deal. And I also would like for you to share what that even means, because a lot of my audience may not even be aware of what that really means. And honestly, I want everyone to know.
Yeah, sure thing. So the issue with money in politics is that our current government is no longer representative of the people, but instead are catering to the moneyed interest, those individuals who could afford to spend way more money than the ordinary citizen. And what this means is that our democracy is no longer a one person, one vote, and that in turn makes it that the person with the most money is the one with the most political influence.
That makes sense. Can I ask a question that I didn't even think about before? What is the limit that an individual can contribute to like a political campaign?
Well,
you know what the amount was, the limit? I don't recall myself.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head.
It's pretty small though, correct?
Yeah, I believe it's $2,500.
Okay.
For an individual.
So when you're saying money in politics, you're talking lots more money.
Yeah, exactly.
And how does it get filtered? Because if an individual is only allowed to do that, then how do these billionaires and millionaires get to donate more?
Well, through a super PAC or through a particular, like I said, like a PAC or through an organization, and then that organization takes the money and filters it to the individual candidate
that they want to
that they want to support.
So when you say, I have to bring this as a question that came in too, super PAC. So for my audience, like a PAC is a political action committee. We know what that means. Yep. So they're basically come together specifically for a political goal. When you talk of super PAC, what does that mean?
Super PAC
is it just like where there's so much more money from the billionaires, or is it what would that be?
I would see super PAC more of think of it as a bigger account, where people who are interested in donating to a particular campaign could fill that account up, and from that account, the super PAC then funds the candidate.
Okay, so here's another question for you. So we've had this system in place forever, our political system, and the funding for our political campaigns has been in system for years, forever, pretty much. So why all of a sudden has it gotten out of control now?
Yeah, so it's true. You know, America has had democracy for a very long time, and the one thing is that the differences of opinions have always been there, but the one thing is that those differences of opinion were rooted in the representation of the people, right? So now the popular idea that came out of that, the country would implement and we would move forward. But now it has gotten out of control due to several Supreme Court decisions where they have essentially opened the door to unlimited spending in our elections, which essentially has corrupted our elections and corrupted our government. And when the moneyed special interest has gotten involved, it really took the power away from the people's voice and from the people's vote. You know, and those that profited from that system are geared to keep it in place, right? And that really incentivizes them from keeping the cycle that disenfranchises the poor, the middle class, and even some who are well off. And at that point, it's no longer a representative democracy. And we've seen a Princeton study that showed that over the last 20 years, political opinion has almost no effect on legislation that is passed.
That's kind of evident.
Yeah.
Now it is, particularly in the last couple of years.
Exactly. And with that being said, the one way that we could really get that power back is to get big money out of politics.
Yeah, we have. It's funny that you said that. We have a lot of issues currently in our government where they're just the opposite of what the overall political opinion is.
Yeah.
You know, there's some major things that need to be changed, and yet it's almost like our lawmakers don't even hear it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that really got me involved, got me interested, you know. And for me, I was never big into politics, right? But like you mentioned, that all changed in 2016, specifically with Bernie Sanders. And it wasn't so much the results of the campaign or the election that got me active, as much as it was just the realization of the systemic inequalities that really make life harder for the working class and the vulnerable, you know, the elderly, the sick, and the disabled. And that's something that really affected me, because seeing the issues that the American people really care about, overwhelmingly based on polls, we saw that those issues are not being addressed through legislation. And two issues that really got my attention were a Kaiser poll, where 92% of Americans support legislation for allowing the government to negotiate with drug companies to lower prices for Medicare recipients, right? And the other April is where 72% of Americans support legislation where we can purchase pharmaceuticals from Canada. And the funny thing is that just this year, legislation was actually proposed to do that. It had bipartisan support, and it did not pass. And when I
big surprise.
Yeah, right? But when you look into it, when I looked into it at least, I found out that the no votes were really pushed for by those who received big campaign contributions by the pharmaceutical industries, right? And this is an issue that's really important to me specifically, because ever since I can remember as a kid, my aunt, she's been in a wheelchair, right? Taking medication for her pain, severe pain. She's a breast cancer survivor, and she has osteoporosis and arthritis.
Oh my goodness.
Right? And looking at the polls, I know that this isn't an issue that's unique to me. My family, just like many families across the nation, really worry what would happen to our loved ones if the earners in the household, if something were to happen to them, if they were to get laid off, if they were to get sick or injured, right? And they also worry about what would happen if the laws changed with regards to Medicare or Medicaid coverage.
Right.
And looking at that, I said to myself, you know, something needs to change. I need to do something. I need to be active, and not only for myself, because this is something I believe in, but for my aunt, you know, and for people like her who can't, but who deserve to have their voices heard.
Right.
And this is where I felt that something that I needed to do was to get money out of politics, because it's the one issue that affects all other issues.
Well, thank you for sharing why you got involved, because that was going to be my next question. But I have a couple things to comment on that you shared. So when you mentioned about Bernie Sanders pulling you into this kind of, he did the same for me.
Yeah, right.
I left politics many years ago, and I came back in because I felt like I was being called to come back and do something. Hence, that actually is from a banner from the DNC convention back in Philadelphia in 2016. And so actually out of that, I was like, how can I give back? I don't want to run for politics myself. That's not my thing.
Yeah.
And so what I did is I decided to do a show like this, bring community activism out to the community, particularly my community, who is spiritual healers, you know, shamans and yoga people. We kind of stay away from politics typically, but we didn't when Bernie was called in. Like when Bernie was up there, we were like, oh, we need to do something. This is important. The time is right.
Definitely.
And so I think Bernie did a really huge thing to awaken America, because I agree with you. I don't think the issues, people understood them, and they really didn't. It might have hit home a little bit, some of it in their day-to-day lives, but I don't think on the greater scheme until Bernie started voicing his opinion. And I think that's really great. So thank you for mentioning Bernie.
Sure thing.
Because I love Bernie. But I understand what you're saying about the whole the medicine stuff. My parents are on Medicare, and they're elderly, and they have a lot of health issues, and they struggle all the time to pay their medicine. And I still, you know, I can't even imagine. And the reason they struggle so much is my dad had a great job all his life. He had a great retirement until we had a huge bubble collapse in our economy. Gee, I wonder where that came from. Money in politics,
Exactly.
the banking industry. So my parents have struggled because they lost a lot of their savings and their future, basically. And so they struggle to get their medicines too. And my dad needs it to breathe because he has severe lung issues. He's got scarring on his lungs, so he can't breathe. He needs the oxygen. My mom, she's also in a wheelchair, and she's having trouble moving, and she's got all kinds of other health issues as well. And it's a shame, because I feel really sad, because it's not even something I can totally help them with either, because financially the prescription drug prices are ridiculous.
Yeah, they're out of this world.
Yeah, and you see comparisons to other countries. It shocks me. It shocks me that, like, we actually create the pill and we can't even get it for what it costs.
Yeah,
You know?
and it's getting back to that legislation where, you know, getting these pharmaceuticals from Canada, you know, the people support this legislation, 75%.
Yes.
You know, and when we have an unresponsive Congress, that's when we, the citizens, have to take really charge and, you know, push legislations that we care about, like getting big money out of politics through the state level,
Right.
to make it happen.
Well, you know, and it's funny, like I hear you about the whole, you know, being able to buy from Canada, but the truth is we shouldn't have to.
Exactly.
We shouldn't.
Yeah.
We should be able to negotiate prices or change the whole system. That's what I actually would prefer, the whole system changing, so we don't have what we currently have, because I don't think it's even the prices. I don't think it's working the way it is. I think a lot of the system needs to change. That's my view on it.
Yes.
So I know there's a lot of organizations out there that do actually focus on getting money out of politics and trying to change things, and they've been around for quite some time. So what is different with Wolf PAC compared to those organizations?
Yeah, well, Wolf PAC is unique in the sense that we recognize that we do have an unresponsive Congress, specifically when it comes to this issue as well. You know, so Wolf PAC is an organization that is dealing through the state level. You know, we have elected officials who can represent us, and going through the state level, we don't need to deal with an unresponsive Congress.
And in the state level, I feel like, for me at least, what I've noticed and experienced, that typically they're more responsive to their constituents.
Exactly.
You know, they're not out of reach. You know, I think once you go to Washington, you're like gone. You know, like, bye. Where did you go? You know, and it's harder to reach them. I think, at least in the state level, you're right. We probably have more responsive legislators here.
Yeah, and that's really the focus of Wolf PAC on a national level, where we are getting each of the state legislatures on board to pass to call for an Article 5 convention.
What is that?
An Article 5 convention. Well, let's start with Article 5.
Yes.
Article 5 of the Constitution.
Yeah, this is all good, people, so I will actually post this up on the bottom.
Yeah, sure thing. So Article 5 of the Constitution is the article that delineates the ability to propose an amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Now, the Article 5 states that both the federal level, which is Congress, and the states have equal power to propose this amendment.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing, because my degree is in political science, and I don't remember that.
Yeah, but the good thing is that if Congress does not recognize the consensus of the people wanting this as an amendment, then the states could call for a convention. And once we have 66% of the states calling on the same topic, then we have Congress is then required to call for a convention by the Constitution. Once that convention is called, the delegates that were sent by the states propose the amendment, and once the amendment is proposed, it would come back to the states for an extremely high 75% to be ratified. Once 75% of the states ratify it, it becomes an amendment to the U.S. Constitution.
So what would that take? What does that take in terms of a constitutional convention? First of all, when was the last time we had one?
Well, for an Article 5 convention, it takes first consensus, right? The states, the people recognize that this is an issue that is important, of utmost importance to the country. And the way our political system is currently set up, due to some Supreme Court decisions, they have essentially equated that unlimited spending of money equates to free speech, guaranteed to by the First Amendment. And with that interpretation of our highest law, what that does is it essentially opens the floodgates for corruption in government and corruption of our election. So now, what the Article 5 convention allows is for the states to bypass Congress and propose the amendment to the Constitution.
Okay, so in the state itself, how many people need to be in favor? Is there a percentage that you need from the state?
Yeah, it just needs to pass both the state Congress and the state Senate.
Okay.
Yeah, so once it passes both chambers, it then is then considered a call to Congress for the proposal for the convention.
That's really amazing. That's actually great. And how has it happened anywhere else? Any other states taking part in this?
Actually, 5 states have passed the resolution. We have Vermont was the first, California, the biggest state, right, in the union.
That's huge.
Yeah, exactly. Then we had Illinois, New Jersey, and Rhode Island was the last one.
Oh, wow. So we have a couple around here.
Yeah, a few neighbors, right? A few neighbors. So
A few neighbors, so Connecticut should be next.
Yeah, yep. That's our plan, to make Connecticut the 6th state to call for an Article 5 convention.
Has it gone to any of the southern states? Just a curiosity
Oh,
question.
we are active in all 50 states.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because as mentioned, 66% of the states need to call for this convention in order for it to happen.
Okay.
So we are involved in all 50 states, and in some states, we're just as active as Connecticut is, you know, in getting this resolution passed.
So I want to go back to my question earlier when I said, when was the last time we had a constitutional convention? Do you know what the last time that it's happened?
The last time an amendment passed was, I believe, 94.
But it wasn't constitutional convention, was it?
Well, no. Well, it was to pass an amendment.
Okay.
Right.
So it was just to pass the amendment.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So
if you mean a convention to pass an amendment,
to do what we're suggesting.
exactly.
Yeah.
An Article 5 convention has never been done in that sense.
That's interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So
Because we also need to understand that An Article 5 convention is a tool, right? It's a tool of democracy. So in the sense where we have protests, that's a tool, right?
Right.
We have the state level legislature, that's a tool of democracy.
Right.
We have Congress, that's a tool. The Article 5 call for convention is one of our strongest tool to protect against an unresponsive Congress. And in each of the times, so we had 4 out of the last 10 amendments were actually started by a call for an Article 5 convention
Oh,
on those
that's
topics.
interesting. Okay.
Exactly. And the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, they started out as a call for a convention. But in each of those cases, Congress decided to respond. And so what we see is that more than half, 14 out of the 27 amendments, have started out as a state call for an Article 5 convention.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow, this is amazing. So I guess this is just a thought in my mind is, do you think it's possible that Congress will heed the call?
Yeah, actually, the most likely
I'm
scenario.
curious about that because I'm thinking about all the money that's dumped in and all the things that have been happening, particularly in the last year. All the stuff that's been happening, I almost wonder, do they care?
That's a really good question. And we believe that they won't until the pressure is, unbearable. And there's no better example of this than the 17th Amendment, where we were one state away from proving that Congress was unresponsive on this issue, right?
And can you tell my audience what the 17th Amendment is?
The 17th Amendment is citizens' election of senators,
Okay.
as opposed to senators being elected by the state. So their vision then was that it was corrupt. And this is our vision of money in politics now, that it is corrupt. So the most likely scenario is that when we have enough states, the Congress does not want to give up the monopoly they have on proposing amendments, right? Because when Congress proposes it, you would think that it would be a little more watered down than when the people actually get, to sit at the table at this
Right.
Article 5 convention and, give in their proposal for this amendment.
Right.
So we feel like putting the political pressure on them will get them to act. But if they don't, we are way more than ready to propose this amendment.
That's amazing because that is it's a whole interesting idea if you think about it. If this has never happened, and just to imagine us all coming together and saying, hey, you guys aren't doing anything, basically. It's it's almost like anarchy without being anarchy.
Right, right.
you know?
It's a tool of democracy, and conventions have been had at the state level since, the birth of the country. We've had more conventions than presidential election and primaries combined, right? There are over 200 conventions held by states, and their constitution is still intact. So getting our resolution passed through the Article 5 convention is something that we are more than ready for.
That's amazing. So why choose this path to getting money out of politics when there might be other paths? Aren't there other paths to do it?
Well, the truth is that money has been allowed to corrupt our government, like I mentioned, and our elections, specifically with Supreme Court decision, Buckley v. Vallejo, Citizens United, and McCutcheon, which, as mentioned, equated the
I'm not
First
familiar
Amendment.
with McCutcheon.
No, McCutcheon was the most recent.
Okay, I'm not.
At 2014.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that one.
So we had Buckley v. Vallejo kind of gave personhood. Citizens United equated it to free speech. And McCutcheon, off the top of my head, I'll have to get back to you. I'll get you the text on
Okay,
that.
corporations can be considered individuals.
Individuals, yes. And because they are individuals, they are allowed to fund
Which
campaigns.
in and of itself, it is ridiculous because they're obviously not individuals.
Exactly.
And for them to have the same rights as an individual is really awful. Are they paying their fair share of taxes? No. As we well know.
The question really is, or one of the possible solutions is, if you're able to vote, you should be able to finance,
Right.
a campaign. And and they're
Right, because it's your interest in that sense. But like if it's a
Exactly.
corporation, that's completely different. That's not, it's a business. Their motives are not about the well-being of America. Their motives are about the well-being of their business. So yeah, that's really horrible.
Yeah. So with the continuing, why this route, right? So with that interpretation of money in politics, any effort to kind of limit the amount of money in politics would be struck down by the Supreme Court, right? Because the Supreme Court has already decided that money is free speech. And if we decide to change the Supreme Court, that could take decades, if not a lifetime, right? And this issue is too important. This is far too urgent for us to leave to Congress.
Right.
So that's where we believe that the change that the American people need, that 96% of the Americans already agree with, should be done through going above the Supreme Court, through going above Congress, and making it the 28th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution.
That's wonderful. That's amazing. And so I guess my next question leads me to more here local in Connecticut. What's happening in Connecticut? I know you were talking about you guys are hoping to make this the next state, but what's happening currently in Connecticut, and how are the legislators perceiving it, and are they open? What's happening?
Yeah, so right now in Connecticut, we have citizens from all over the state calling their legislators, sending emails, meeting up with their legislators to let them know that, they support campaign finance reform, specifically getting money out of politics. And some of those are Wolf PAC volunteers, but not all. And they are just being active citizens as one of the 96%, that care about it, to actually have their voices be heard.
So are the representatives responsive to the voices, or what's been happening with them?
We've met with several representatives, and they are the more they understand about the legislation, which is something that Wolf PAC tries to do, educate our legislators so that when the free and fair election resolution comes up for a vote, that they can make an informed decision, an informed vote. And we do have legislators who have been very supportive of this legislation, which is promising, and they help us get in contact with others. And then there are some who still need to be worked a little, still needs more information. They still have some questions as to, the process, or if this been used before, is this the best route to go? And, the more information we can bring to them, the more informed they can be when they do make that vote.
Something that just popped into my mind was, so we talked a lot about Bernie, and so that's a very progressive view if you're viewing Bernie. Is it a nonpartisan thing?
Yeah.
That's a really valid question.
Of course, yeah, for sure.
For this.
Wolf PAC itself is nonpartisan.
Okay.
And the resolution is nonpartisan, because when we talk about money in politics, it affects everyone. In our 2016 election, our president, he said, draining the swamp, and Bernie called it getting big money out of politics.
Right.
So these are issues that affect both the left and the right.
Right.
It's a nonpartisan issue, because corruption is corruption, no matter on what side you are.
Oh, I totally agree with that. Are you finding that both sides of the aisle, if you will, are coming together on this?
Yeah.
In Wolf PAC, you're finding that people
we are seeing that some legislators from both the left and the right are coming together for it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful to know, actually.
Yep.
So what are the next steps here in Connecticut? Like, what do we need to do next in order, we have the legislative session coming up soon, so what's coming up for 2018?
So right now, what Wolf PAC is doing is we're making our voice heard. We're knocking on doors, we're canvassing, we're making the citizens aware of what Wolf PAC is and what campaign finance reform means, and having them contact their legislators and, be involved, and also thank them for those who are supportive and request support from those who are still on the fence. So right now we're getting other citizens active. We are making phone calls as well as sending emails and just tackling this issue head on.
That's really awesome. So how can my audience get in contact and get involved and help Wolf PAC,
Yeah.
whether they're in Connecticut or not? Because my hope is that once we air this here in Guilford, that we actually put it out onto social media and it gets shared all over. My plan is the whole state gets to see this.
Yeah, sure thing. So you could join Wolf PAC through www.wolf-pac.com, PAC spelled PAC. As well as we also have a Facebook page, www.facebook.com/wolfpackhq. That's our national site, and Wolfpack CT is our CT site for Facebook. And we could also be contacted via email at connecticut@wolf-pac.com.
Thank you. That's awesome. That's awesome information. So what kind of commitment do people need to have, or any kind of background they need to have to work with Wolf PAC? I mean, do they need to have a political background?
Not at all.
Is there training?
There is training. We do, once someone decides to join or come on board, we do a training for about an hour or so, just to get their feet wet. And then once they come on, we have a mentorship, right? So we have a state organizer, and every week we have a state call in Connecticut. It's on Wednesdays.
Okay.
And especially when I started, I was like super busy,
Yeah.
right? I worked a 12-hour day, sometimes 70-hour weeks.
Yeah.
So you could imagine. So one of my first tasks was actually just contact my state legislator, right? So my state representative, my state senator, and just request a meeting to talk about campaign finance reform and the free and fair election resolution. And once I got a little more time, then I started calling other Wolf PAC volunteers who signed up but who haven't yet been reached out to. And doing that, we got more volunteers. And once my weekends became free, I started doing local meetups with Wolf PAC volunteers where we bonded, shared experiences, kind of went over what worked for us when we are talking to legislators, and how we could really put our best foot forward during the meeting. And then as well, when I got a little more time, we also did canvassing, where we walked around, knocked on doors, and let the citizens know that this resolution will be proposed for the next legislative session, and to call their legislators to support this resolution, and let them know that this is an issue that citizens in the state of Connecticut really do care about, just as citizens across the country do.
Is there stuff for people to do if they're afraid to make phone calls?
Yeah.
Or they're afraid to go in person to speak with their legislators? Because
Exactly.
I'm sure a lot of my audience would love to help out in this situation, but be very afraid of I'm not comfortable doing that.
Yeah, it's a good point. So Wolf PAC does have several different teams, right? So we have a data team for people who are more interested in doing research. They could do research from the comfort of their home. They have a writing team for those individuals who have good writing skills, for correspondences that we send out. We would like those edited, reviewed, make sure that we're getting our message out effectively. And we also have an amazing creative team, that we have volunteer web developers, web designers, and people who could design to really put images out and really get our best foot forward when it comes to that type of advertisement.
And are you on social media? Is that some other avenue they can find you?
Yeah, like mentioned, we are on Facebook,
Okay.
and we also are on Medium. We have a Medium page.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, great. So, are you kind of excited to be involved in Wolf PAC, or is it a lot of work?
No, it's exciting. I mean, with any volunteer organization, you really get to choose how involved you are with it, right? Like I mentioned before, when I was really busy, there were things that I could do to still help, right?
Yeah.
Send a quick email here and there. And as my time kind of increased, I decided that I wanted to increase as well. So it's really flexible. with the amount of time you get to provide to Wolfpack. I mean, this is a volunteer organization, really grassroots, and your commitment to us is always appreciated, and your time is always respected. And that's one thing we really do drive down to our volunteers, that, you know, your time will make sure that our meetings are quick, are effective, you know, they're right to the point. We'll give you actionable tasks, you know, SMART goals,
Right.
where they're specific, measurable, you know, attainable, reach, and timely. You know, so it's something that you could actually set a goal, complete that goal, and measure it. So you do have a sense of accomplishment every week when you do receive a task.
Right. So I have this is another side of campaign finance reform that I don't think a lot is talked about. We're just talking about how, you know, all this money is being thrown in and kind of buying politicians, if you will. But if we had a finance reform situation, then people who are just like you or me could actually run for office.
Exactly.
And not have to worry about, like, you know, big business bullying the little man, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
That's talked about very little. I mean, is that something that you speak with people about as well?
Yeah, I mean, Wolfpack doesn't have a particular amendment that they have in mind, right? Our purpose is to call for an Article 5 convention where the states delegates then decide what the best way to move forward is for the country, right? Now, there are possible solutions that could come out of it. It could be, you know, recusal. It could be, you know, closing the foreign money loophole. It could be, you know, more transparency from those who donate. Something that could come out of it. It could be, you know, vouchers, tax rebate, or public financing.
Right.
Or something that has been spoken about is, if you can vote, you can finance, right? So there are many different solutions that could come out of this Article 5 convention. Wolfpack is not tied to one because we feel like the country as a whole
Needs to agree to
exactly needs to agree to whatever it is, and needs to be something that's popular, you know. And consensus is what really is is the driving force to this.
I find that it's interesting that an amendment like that would really wipe clean some of the Supreme Court decisions.
Exactly.
And the bills that were created to let money flow into politics, right? So it'd probably wipe that clean.
Yep. It would wipe it clean, and then every decision thereafter would have to be done based on this new amendment.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
I wonder what that would do to a lot of politicians that are currently in office.
Exactly, you know, and it's more grassroots at that point.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's the way to go. I think that's really what our democracy was built on originally anyway. The whole plan was the people have the voice.
Exactly.
You know, not business, not just like a handful of people, but the whole.
Yeah. When the majority of the people do have their voices heard, you know, more often than not, we're going to get it right, you know.
Yeah, and it's going to be amazing.
Exactly, and most people benefit, and that's the definition of democracy.
Right, that's incredible. So I just want to mention a couple things that we talked about that I want to just throw in there. So we talked about, you know, the pharmaceutical industry, for example, with money in politics and how that's affected decisions in our Congress. But it also affects us in the way of not just that, the environmental policies, right? Those are another big thing that's getting affected, as well as like the banking industries. You know, so it's not limited to just what we were talking about. I just want to make sure people know that it's not limited. It's definitely almost every aspect it's been affecting. Exactly.
Every issue you care about, you could see money in politics has an effect, whether it's education, you know, healthcare, the environment, like you said, banking, financing. Every issue, you would have a legislator that would vote in a particular way based on where the money's coming from. And if you can't trust a legislator to take your voice, your vote over, you know, the influence, the corrupting influence, to be exact, of money, then we're not living in a democracy.
Right, and you know, it's what's interesting to me is what keeps coming up in my mind, in my head, is back to the crash, you know, 2008, and how we had legislation that actually saved bankers from going to jail. And that just blows my mind. I know it's a little bit off topic, and it's not totally tied to Wolf PAC. This is completely separate in my opinion. But that just rings in my head over and over when I think about it, because what happened, it destroyed so many lives, so many families, people lost so many homes, and it's terrible. It actually put us in a really bad way. And I think of the way the rest of the world is handling some of this stuff. It's amazing to see other countries and what they are doing and what they have done to handle their money issues.
Yeah, we definitely have to take this, this issue by the horns, at the state level. We really need to push for an Article 5 convention to make a fundamental change to the way we finance our campaigns and our elections, which really reshapes our government.
That people say often, money is the root of all evil, right? That's a famous saying, but it really is like the core problem in our government, because actually, as we just said, it brings us back to everything that we want shifted in our environment, everything we want to balance out or we want to help one another with, it all goes back to where money's coming from. And so if money is the source of it, we need to get to the root and pull it out and change it. Because if we don't do that, I agree with you. I think it's detrimental to our democracy, maintaining it and keeping it. Because at some point, it does get even more out of control. I don't even know, it's possible, because it seems like it's pretty out of control right now. That's what I feel like. It's pretty out of control right now. But I think it can only get worse if we don't do something about that.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Is there anything else you'd like to add before we go?
I think you did a pretty good job at covering. You asked some really good questions, and I appreciate you, asking me those tough questions. Just because, if we're not challenged to address those questions, then we can't really put our best foot forward. We have vetted this idea, and this is something that 96% of Americans really agree with. And once you have that type of consensus, there's only one thing to do, and that's, go above anyone who stops you.
Yeah, go forward. Nothing's going to stop you at all.
Go above Congress, go above Supreme Court, and make this the 28th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Yeah,
I think it's awesome. I applaud your efforts, too, and your experience, because you offered so much to me today. I really appreciate it. Hope my audience understands that. And I hope my audience will, contact either Wilmer, or just contact Wolf PAC directly, or even contact me and ask me how you can get involved, and I'll be happy to forward information to you. I think it's really important that you do get involved in this. It does affect our world. It affects us in a way that we probably didn't realize all the time. And it seems to be getting worse and worse. So I think it's really important now that we focus on that. So I just want to say that, one of the things that always resonates in my mind is that we always hear people talking about making America great again. And I look around at so many people with the low wages that we have, struggling to survive on those low wages, not having health care, and really just all these other imbalances that are happening in our country. And I feel like if we don't change this and we don't look at that, how is America becoming great again? I think we need to really take the bull by the horns with this and really change the way money is in politics. Because I don't think we'll ever get rid of money. I don't think any kind of financial means is going to be gone from our society. However, I think it has to change. It can't stay the way that it is currently. So I encourage you to support this organization, and I really encourage you to either get educated, share this information with everyone that you know. If you can volunteer, if you can donate, that would be phenomenal, actually, because I think they could take donations.
Yeah, we do take donations.
You're a nonprofit, correct?
Yeah, we are. We do take donations, and those donations do go to, providing materials for flyers, things of that sense, to provide speakers, our national directors. They do fly out for committee hearings. They help educate legislators across the country at every state level. So donations are very much welcome.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you heard that. Donations, they take donations. So if you can afford to, please do that. If not, you can always volunteer. One other last question. So I know we're focusing on Connecticut because we live here in Connecticut, but what about the other states? Are there other states that are really active, like almost ready?
Yeah, there are about half a dozen states. Colorado's pretty active, and there are another 5 or so who are like extremely active that are just on the cusp, as we are. But I don't know them off the top of my head.
That's okay. I was just curious if other states are getting ready for this too.
Yeah.
Are you finding people, when you first start talking to people who don't have a clue about this, especially you're talking about going door to door, are you finding that they understand what you're talking about, where you're coming from? Are they resistant? What are you finding with people? These are questions just popping in my head now.
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah, so we've gone door to door, and we've met several people who were just so glad that we're doing this. There was one gentleman who I handed a flyer to, and I'm like, hey, Wolf PAC's having a meeting. We're trying to meet up with your legislator this evening. Would you please come out? And he said, thank you so much for doing this. You know, money in politics is an issue that I feel affects all other issues. And we really appreciate how active you've been, and not me in particular, but, you know, Wolf PAC and other individuals in the state of Connecticut have been in trying to get this issue passed.
That's
So
wonderful.
yeah, it's been very well received, and you know, that's all you can ask for, you know, for as an activist, as someone who's volunteering.
Right. Well, I want to just kind of wrap us up, but before I do, I want to mention that here in Guilford, our representative, in case people do not know, or hoping they know, is Representative Sean Scanlon, and our senator is Ted Kennedy. So please contact them and let them know that you are interested in making sure money gets out of politics, and you really want to work on this proposal to get a constitutional convention happening so that we can get this amendment, because it sounds like it might be a way that we can actually change our world without having to wait to see if Congress changes their mind.
Exactly.
I think that's key, and that's really important. So thank you everyone for joining me today. I appreciate it. Thank you, Wilmer, for coming out and sharing all this information and educating us. I really appreciate it. I hope that it helps everyone out there.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it being here.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
In this together.